I'm Raja Swat, and I'm with Contours. Today's guest is Marc Girardot, and I've chatted to you, Marc, for I think it's the third time I'm interviewing you, and you're an entrepreneur, but your experience that's relevant to what we're going to discuss today is experience in biotech industry, and you worked with a startup that did cancer vaccine development. Your research over the last few years has been the closest to what I think is, first of all, it's easy to understand. That you've been able to explain so many things about COVID that have now gone way past that. And we want to talk about that today. So I'm really grateful to be chatting to you again.
Good to be back, Nadia.
I want to start with the Bolus Theory. You pioneered it, and it appears to extend to really so many things that I assume a lot of people are afraid to share. But what is the Bolus Theory, very briefly? And then there are 5 observations that you made in 2023, factual observations. How are they foundational to the Bolus Theory?
They're extremely foundational. I didn't make them in 2023. I actually made them much earlier. They were, maybe I stated them in 2023, but really I started that. So let's go to the Bolus Theory very quickly. Fundamentally, the Bolus Theory is the idea that when you inject intramuscularly, you're actually often, 100% of the time, injecting intravascularly direct in part, either a tiny dose or a larger dose. When it's a tiny dose, the damage it does is relatively small. Your body is capable of repairing. When the dose is bigger, depending on where it goes, it's going to be it's not going to be able to repair.
Mm-hmm.
And the fundamental idea behind that is a lot of people have been telling me that the Bolus Theory cannot explain all the adverse events. The reality is first of all, yes, it can, and the reason for that is that it's not that I'm smarter or anything. It's just simply the fact that by injecting directly into the vascular system, into the bloodstream, you are bypassing hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. And basically, it's not that the Bolus Theory can explain everything. It's the fact that if you actually do away with 100,000 years of evolution, you're poisoning the person. Okay, it's very simple.
Yeah.
And you can poison the person in 2 different ways. You can poison the person by destroying its vascular system with a mere another, and notably, if you start creating clots or basically go to stop the blood flow and then necrose some of the organs, or possibly micro perforate blood tissue barriers that have made also that have evolved to have a task in all of our organs and that are critical to that. So if you are breaking down the barriers, well, you know that something bad is going to happen because they're there for a reason. Good. So that's part of the theory is more on the vascular system and the organs. And then there's another part of the theory which is around stem cells, and the fact that most of the stem cells are typically first of all, they're fundamental to life because they store and protect our genetic material or matrix. And that's the one. And 2, they are indispensable to red blood cells, white blood cells. So white cells are immune system, and of course all the regeneration and the repair. And if you damage these cells, normally you can't. But if a vaccine manages reaching these cells, you are at risk of both cancer and genetic disorders.
So why does it sometimes manage to reach into the cells and other times not? Because a lot of people will be confused that these injections are done the same way.
So the you're talking about the stem cells here, or for the stem cells, it's basically a math number. It's just a number. So the bolus is the idea that you're going to inject a drug intravenously to deliver that drug in a concentrated fashion. I didn't invent that term, nor the science behind it, because that's basic science for most of the drugs that need to be delivered that way in hospitals every day, past year or years. But what it does is it increases significantly the probabilities of you reaching one of those cells that evolution has hidden away. So stem cells are hidden away in the bone marrow, and it niches inside the vascular, the blood vessels at the tedium. And so with a vaccine that is injected properly, i.e., it's in the tissue of the muscle, then it'll trickle back into the bloodstream slowly, and the concentration is going to be extremely small, and therefore the chances of it growing, in the backwards in the bone marrow is going to be extremely low. So that's a very important point, because it means that people, not everybody is being harmed, far from it, thankfully, but so not everybody's getting cancer, not everybody's getting that, because not everybody got an intravenous injection, a direct, significant one. But those who've had have a risk of damaging their organs or their system in a variety of ways: thrombosis, aneurysms, white clot syndrome, as well as arteriosclerosis, and of course necrosis, which you can destroy the organs with by depleting them of blood. So I have, for example, two friends who've lost 20 and 30% of their lungs, for example. But you can also have microperforation of the vascular system, which is well documented. If you go and type capillary leakage post-vaccine on Wolfnet, you'll find outputs. Well, maybe not on tens of articles. It's well documented. And that leads to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS. It leads to leaky gut syndrome and obesity. It leads to endocrine disorders, of course, infertility, and many others.
Were the two types of injection protocols followed with the COVID injections? I would imagine that injection protocol is a global standard. What was the situation there?
Well, supposedly, if that's where the pharma, it's that maybe they didn't understand what's happening, but fundamentally, the vaccine designers understand that this is not supposed to go in high concentration to the bloodstream. Okay, so the protocol that public health authorities have is a direct injection intramuscularly with a very strong push and no aspiration. Aspiration is a very old technique. It's almost 100 years old. That was initially intended to avoid those accidents. It's not effective. It's not effective. It's not very effective. It's difficult to undertake, and if you're not exactly inside a vessel, it's not going to work. The problem is for some reason that escapes me. But it escaped me for a long time, so I understand why it escaped everybody. But people need to understand that injecting part of the dose intravenously is almost a certainty physically. even if you're not inside the blood vessel. Why? You know, when I should probably, I don't know you do that but I do that as you know that if you have a blocked sink, right, you use a plunger, you could easily have the bad experience of pushing on the water, thinking it's going to go down. When actually, what you get is a whole flow of soil water coming at you from the old overflow hole. This is exactly what's happening. It is if you damage a cell, not a cell, sorry, a blood vessel, all the way with the needle, and it's close enough within 1 centimeter, part of the dose is going to go into that vessel. It's physics. It's basic physics. There's no other way. Why? Is because the liquid is going to go where there's lower pressure, and the pressure that you're injecting it at is much, much, much higher than what you have in your veins. Right? So any vessel that's hit and that's cut by the needle within that last centimeter is at risk of taking part of the dose. Now, if it's in the closer range, it's going to take a big dose, and that can be extremely dangerous. If it's in the, that's at 1 centimeter, it's really far away. It's going to take a tiny bit of it, and that will be good. But that's the part that doctors haven't understood, and public health authorities haven't understood, is that everybody's getting an IV injection when they shouldn't. So the protocol is not complied with, never. And that just on that basis, we should stop all injections. Okay, because that's the other thing that I've discovered is this is not particular to mRNA vaccines. You have the same problem with HPV vaccines, with MMR vaccines that you're injecting to kids, with hepatitis B vaccine. They will actually do the same thing. And so where my discovery is astronomical in a way, is that it means that we've been poisoning our population for the past 40 or 50 years, and we've been accelerating this. And when you look at it, it explains the explosion of autism, of arteriosclerosis, of endocrine disorders, of infertility. What else? I mean, all for the first time, we have a theory that is consistent and explains why in a day where the world is basically self-sufficient in terms of food, so basically there's less famine ever, that we have the best medicine in the world, we're sicker than we've ever been. And that doesn't make sense. And here, again, I had a discussion with Jay Batashaya a few weeks ago, or last week actually. And he was telling me, Marc, it's fascinating. You need to prove it. You need to prove epidemiologically prove it. I'm going to leave that to others, even though when you do, I have a test. And my test is, I call it the Bolus Theory test. What it is if I'm right, then the people who have these illnesses should be hit in other places more so than others. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
If mothers are right that their children have been harmed by vaccines, and then my theory is right, then these kids that have Alzheimer's should, from a probability standpoint, have more other disease than the general population. Why? Because this bolus is not directed at one place. It's a chaotic movement. So occasionally it's going to go and hit other places and harm other things. Right? It's the Bolus Theory test. What basically I did, for example, for autism, which I knew nothing about. Okay? I knew nothing about autism, even though I'm I'm passionate about the brain, but I had never looked into autism because I said, look, trying to understand a brain that develops and has problems is nearly impossible. It's probably impossible. I'm not going to waste my time on that. But I did, when I started writing my book, one afternoon, it was hard to write the book, especially since I hadn't written articles before. My brain didn't like me repeating myself. So I had this afternoon. I was in Brittany, and I said, okay, I'm going to test autism. I'm going to test my theory on autism. And if my theory is right, then I should be able to say stuff on autism without knowing anything about it. This guy went on, and I said, well, this bolus that hit those poor children most likely hit other places in the brain. So, and most in the brain or in the skull. So they're most likely going to have more hearing problems and visual problems. They're going to be blind more often, deaf more often. They're going to have endocrine disorders more often. They're going to have Parkinson's disease, ALS, Alzheimer's more often. They would have had a stroke also more often when they were a child. For that, in the endocrine disorders, because there's two sides to the endocrine disorders. Either you necrose or glands, and therefore you're not producing enough hormones anymore, right? Destroyed, gone, or you're releasing too much hormone because the blood tissue barrier is open, right? So it's not over secretion or overproduction; it's simply over release. You don't have any control anymore, so everything is going out. So I listed the 10.
Was there 40 hypotheses that you tested it against?
Yes. So I basically listed about 40 hypotheses, and they all came out positive.
And was this in respect of autism cases and the injectional protocol, from what decade?
I'm sorry?
Dating back to when...
No, I think it's impossible to link it directly. What's very clear is if you have if you have a theory, okay, and you test it on a reality over 40 hypotheses, that's 1.1 trillion combinations. Okay.
So there's 1 in 1 million times of it being incorrect.
Exactly. You have 1.1 trillion chances of being incorrect. When was the last time okay. So mathematically it's impossible I'm wrong. Okay? When I said that to Professor Levy, he went, wow. Okay? He went, wow. He did accept that as, it's a very strong signal. Now, what's interesting is that beyond autism, whenever you do those tests, you always have that. Okay, so if you test it on arteriosclerosis, you're going to have a lot of these also. If you test it on if you test it on obesity, you're going to have a lot of that too. Okay, so it's very interesting because a lot of doctors has been saying that, for example, leaky gut is causing Alzheimer's, and indeed there's a lot of people who have leaky gut or people who have Alzheimer's have leaky gut, but it's not systematic. The reality of it is it's the same cause. It's completely different, and the same cause is a bolus. Is that bolus streaming down, splitting, one going to the brain and harming the brain, another one going and hitting the intestines.
And this theory has only to do with the method of injections and no bearing on what the contents of any given vaccine.
No, the content needs to be cytotoxic. The content needs to be toxic in the way or another. Okay, you have, and it needs to be so. For example, if you compare a vaccine like the traditional flu vaccines that were protein vaccines,
Okay.
they can do the same thing, but their toxicity is window is much smaller, because the only way they kill is through saturation, because you have a bolus. So basically, you drown the cells into proteins, and of course the cells die. But that's going to be probably 1,000 times less often happening than with mRNA or with a virus-like or pseudovirus-like or attenuated virus vaccines. Because even an attenuated virus vaccine, if you send a bolus, it's going to penetrate those cells. Each time it penetrates one cell, that cell is going to get destroyed. And so if you repainted the entire walls of your endothelium with those particles, so particles that entered in every single one of these cells, then the immune system is going to react and destroy all the cells, and then you're going to get those white clots, which are band-aids that your body is putting, their fibrin, that your body is putting all those walls, because evolution, normally it should be like you're bleeding. You're not bleeding. So you have these white casts on those on the inside of your blood vessels, and you could survive with it, most likely for some time, but it's frozen, because I'm not going to go to.
What about the fact that there have been really a disturbing amount of turbo cancer reports? People that get cancer out of nowhere, and all of a sudden it's all over their bodies, and then months.
Yes.
Is this linked to anything to do with the toxicity of the actual vaccines? Or is it because it was a mass vaccination campaign, and as a result thereof, obviously more people will? Because the turbo cancers, as far as I know, are recently new. That's not even their official name.
No, it's not new. You have turbo cancers where you've always had turbo cancers. What's new is the amount of them coming, because there's an increase of it. So the turbo cancers are just the tip of the iceberg of all the other cancers. In my work with the Bolus Theory, I have
traditional cancer theory is upside down. Everything we've understood about it is.
Yeah, I put in cancer theory on its head, and what I'm basically saying is that what we've, and there, I'm not the only one saying that, but I'm the only one saying that vaccines are causing it. The traditional cancer theory is that for a reason or another, stimulation from the sun or whatever, or toxins, that you're going to kickstart a mutation process in your cells, and these cells are going to, regain a number of features, P53 inhibition, mid bodies, H-turn, and a number of other things. But the reality of it, and frankly, I believe this theory for a long time, because I never had thought about it and never questioned it. Now, if you start looking at the mathematics of it, it's just impossible. One, and two, the reality of it is that all the features of stem cells, of cancer cells, are those of a stem cell. So, which means that basically, cancer cells are stem cells, and there's numerous research that have been published in the past 20 years that states that. It basically says, look, it looks like cancer cells are actually stem cells. They have all the features, and so, how is that happening? What I'm proposing, and it's one of the, a lot of my theory is actually very solid and been completely confirmed, only on the cardiovascular side. I don't think there's any conjecture Maybe on the white clots, there's one detector, but fundamentally everything is proven. On the cancer side, I have one conjecture, and it's the following. It's that stem cells, when contaminated by something, by a vaccine or something else, something that's poison to it, have one alternative, which is to replicate. That's what stem cells do, right? That's the only thing they know how to do is replicate. And you have to realize that normal cells, when they're contaminated, they committed suicide. That's the only way to solve it. So I'm pretty sure that if stem cells had a better way, had found a way to avoid, to solve this, they would have, we would have gotten it with the rest of ourselves, because committed suicide is a very, resource demanding process. So the idea that stem cells replicates when they're contaminated is also confirmed with what happened when there's over oxygenation of stem cells, which is, we'll talk about oxygen therapy, but exactly what is happening is it's known that stem cells, when they're over oxygenated, they replicate. And we know that oxygen is a poison to stem cells because of reactive oxygen species. They're very fragile, and therefore, when oxygen as a poison occurs, they multiply. So it's not, my conjecture is that they do that as a protection mechanism to dilute the poison. So if you want to dilute the poison, you need to split 7 times, basically. But if you wanted to dilute 1,000 times, it's going to be 12 times or something like that. So fundamentally, what this does is it's a real problem, because then you have more stem cells than you're supposed to have. Right? You have a defined number of stem cells, a hierarchy of stem cells, and if you have more cooks in the kitchen, every time you're going to order a hamburger, you're going to get 10 hamburgers. Okay? It's as simple as that. So you don't want 10 hamburgers, you order one, you're getting 10. It might be okay for a child who's growing and has a huge need, as long as the genetic material is, if the genetic material is not hard, maybe you're not going to have cancer. But if it's in areas that are like where you need a fixed number, like for example for blood cancer, for blood provisioning, then you can have blood cancer. That's why kids have more blood cancer than parents, although not in ratio. But what's interesting with our theory, and same thing, when you want to shoot holes into a theory, you need to test it against facts, reality. So, for example, this theory explains very well turbo cancers and indolent cancers, or low-grade cancers. Why?
What are indolent or low-grade cancers?
They're just cancers that have a speed that is, so that's more, your immune system is going to be able to deal better. First of all, so that's why. Let me tell you, it makes a lot of sense. Again, and when I came up with the whole theory on cancer theory, it's also very consistent and very. I mean, it's not completely proven, but it makes a lot of sense. If you have a different hierarchy of stem cells, you have, let's say, kings and queens, basically, and then you have low grade rank fat. If there's a demand for one of these high ranking stem cells, it means that they're going to have an influence. Their scale is going to be much greater. So if you multiply that by 100, then you're going to have a huge scale over the entire pyramid. If you're on a low grade, low ranking stem cell, that is at a local level that's already specialized. It's basically repairing some organ at a low level. It's still going to create cancer, but it might be a neoplasm. So it might be something that grows and stops. Okay. If it's very low, it'll stop there, and the immune system will kill it, and it will stop. If it's higher up, it's going to be a low-grade cancer. And let me give you an example: breast cancer. Again, that confirms completely what I'm saying. You have different types of breast cancer, but the most dangerous one and the fastest growing one is called triple negative breast cancer. Why is it called triple negative? It's called triple negative because it has 3 receptors and the others ones have. Why does it have less receptors? It means it's a stem cell that has not specialized yet in the breast.
And why not?
I'm sorry?
Why not? Why does that happen?
Because it's in the breast, it's a higher ranking one. It's not supposed to be specialized because it's answering to different needs, right? And so those are much more dangerous because they have more skin, right? And it's the same thing for leukemia. You have high-grade leukemia, low-grade leukemia, and etc. So the theory explains very well cancer, extremely well cancer. And what it states is that an injection of a product by contaminating a stem cell is a risk of cancer, especially if it's done intravenously.
And again, you're referring to all intravascular injections and devices.
I'm basically saying that, again, what's interesting here is, we know viruses can cause cancer, supposedly, and I'm sure that bacteria probably also. So if a bacteria or cancer cell or a virus or some kind of toxin actually contaminates the stem cell, you're going to have cancer. And you're going to have also genetic disorders. Like, let me explain genetic disorders. It's very, very important because, one of the points hypotheses I had made on autism was they would get genetic disorders. Why am I saying that? Simply because if you put a foreign element, okay, especially a protein, inside of stem cells, and that stem cell starts replicating. You probably don't remember your biology classes. I didn't
even do it.
I didn't remember that either. But fundamentally, what happens is you remember that when you have what is called mitosis, is, when the cells are the process of splitting in two and replicating.
Again,
you have the chromosomes that basically duplicate, right? They duplicate. And they're glued together centrally, and then they separate out into so as to form 2 different nuclei.
Okay.
But let's imagine that this is happening, and you have a protein in the middle, or you have DNA. For my friend Kevin McCurlin, you have DNA, and basically the nucleuses are so the protein is going to damage, or is going to stick, or is going to stop the separation, the proper calibration. So what might happen is you're going to have one chromosome is going to stay on one, and you're going to have three chromosomes there. So you have trisomy, or it's on the other side, you're going to have monosome. So depending on which one stays as the big one, you're going to have monosomy or trisomy. You could actually have also damage to the chromosomes, right? You're going to have deletions, or you're going to have integrations of whatever you have. So, and you see it, by the way, in autistic children have have many genetic disorders, and everybody was, always blaming the parents for Down syndrome or whatever, because you're too old a woman to have a child or whatever, other blaming morally superior.
Yeah,
It really annoys me. That's this thing. The reality of it's caused by a medical intervention, and it's very it's. I mean, the autistic the test, the Bolus test is very clear. If you do that to a child or an infant or a newborn, there's a chance of that happening.
So the MMR vaccines, in other words, are they're one of the first that all of us had to have, and that's probably one of the
genetic disorders. Yes. It's funny because I'm having arguments with some of my friends, notably Kevin McCurran and Alexandre Lecoud, because they are into genetics and how the whole thing needs to cross, how there are all the genetic messaging to cross the membrane, and I'm like, there's no nucleus. What are you talking about? It's physics. It just happens to be there. So of course there's going to be damage. It's just basic physics, and that binding happens with chemistry, so that it's going to happen. The problem is how much of it's going to happen, and the good news behind that is maybe there are cures too, because if you can figure out a way to push out the senior the senior stem cell that's been damaged and been sending the wrong thing, if you can sort of make that stem cell obsolete, then there's a fair chance that you can actually repair these folks without necessarily doing some crazy genetic tinkering, but just by simply possibly replicating senior stem cells on top without tinkering with the genes.
But you mentioned something earlier about the fact that it was the sort of, vaccine manufacturers and pharmaceutical companies that it was their protocol that was used and not that which was standard across the board.
The delivery protocol?
The delivery protocol.
No, the delivery protocol. I don't know. They state that it's supposed to be intramuscular. I think intramuscular. Sorry. This decision not to aspirate, etc., is public health authorities who decide that. Now, they most likely did that very closely with the pharma guys. Okay. Because the reason they stopped aspiration is because they didn't want vaccine hesitancy.
Why would that cause vaccine hesitancy?
Supposedly it's longer. Supposedly there's more pain and then it's been longer. So you see it's like it's like a car manufacturer. I come from the automotive world, saying, "Oh well, we're going to take the airbags off and the seat belts because they're too expensive, and since they're too expensive, we're not going to do it anymore." That's exactly the same type of things. I think that's not what they did. And thank God, but it's crazy. So they are to blame to a certain extent. I mean, it's a collective dysfunction. I'm sure there are some people who did some things wrong somewhere, but fundamentally, this whole thing is a collective dystopia. The fact that it was very interesting. I've been fighting this battle for a very long time, and almost 3 years ago, I was already saying this is what's happening, and I was talking to people like Christian Girardot, for example, with Professor, and I told him, I said, Christian, this is not about pro-vax or anti-vax. This is just about the protocol. We should. I think we could come. We could come to an agreement. well, everybody would agree that these vaccines need to be injected the way they're supposed to, and they aren't.
That doesn't affect the bottom line of the pharmaceutical companies if the delivery method is different. So I don't understand why there would be pushback.
There shouldn't be any pushback. Right now, I'm getting more pushback from what they call our camp, the
dissonant camp.
The dissonant camp. Okay. So
it's one of the things.
I'm getting more pushback from the dissonant camp, because I'm first of all I've falsified most of their, or if not all of their theories.
Can you give me some examples? Because I would imagine that they would, because it seems that this effectively means that, Pfizer and these COVID vaccines are not as malicious an attempt to harm the populations.
There is no malicious attempt. I mean, let's be, first of all, building your own, nobody does that. I mean, you could do it, but I don't think so. I mean, I think collectively they're doing it. That's what they're doing, but nobody's doing it willfully. I don't think so. I may be wrong, because I've been surprised by many things. But I may be wrong. But no. Fundamentally, it's when you do. I come from the automotive world, so what I apply techniques that are applied in automotive to fix things. Mm-hmm. Why? Because in the automotive industry, you do high volume, right? When you're a car manufacturer, like a GM or Toyota, you sell 10 million cars a year. So if you screw up on, and you don't see it very quickly, you end up producing 30 million cars or 40 million cars, and then you can go bankrupt on less than that. Yeah. So Toyota, for example, is extremely good at their at Six Sigma, etc. Their quality level is extremely, extremely high. We're talking in a completely different dimensions as the pharma. And so when you do a root cause analysis that's what I did. When you do a root cause analysis of the vaccine accidents, and you reverse engineer what happens, very, very quickly you see what's happening. It doesn't take a PhD. I'm not a PhD, right? So it's very simple. When you look at the autopsies, what you see is concentrated vascular damage that's done by the T cells. Okay, so you see it in different scenarios. Sometimes extremely wide and concentrated. Sometimes but from a mathematical standpoint, that's impossible, right? Because normally, when the vascular system takes something, it distributes it, or it disseminates it homogeneously, right? Otherwise, we would get some oxygen in one part of the body and not here, and you're dead. Or you see the vascular system. It's a law of the vascular system to disseminate and distribute evenly. So if you're dropping drop by drop a bit of vaccine into the vascular system, and it gets mixed up, what it's going to do, it's going to hit homogeneously. Okay, sometimes by chance you're going to have 1, 2, or 3 hits there, but having 10,000 hits in one area, or even 1 million hits or 2 million hits, that's a mathematical impossibility. Only a bolus could explain that. Okay, only a bolus. So it's what's really funny is that neither doctors or biologists have understood that. Some have, but they've been trying to sideline my theory. It's the only theory that stands. All the others don't stand.
What are the biologists and other scientists' objections to the Bolus theory?
Oh, they have no objections. Scientifically, they're done. They're done. Scientifically, they're done. They only non-scientific argument is it can't be the only reason, and which is not scientific either. But it's not. I mean, you're your intuition or your cognitive dissonance would not want you to that to be just the same thing.
Yeah.
But it is. It is. There is no other way for that to happen. There are two other prevalent theories. Okay, one is the circulating spike theory.
To do with vaccine harms.
Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of vaccine arms, of the COVID vaccine arms, there is only two other theory that sort of are mainstream. Yeah. One is circulating spike theory. The idea is basically because you're producing your own spike, there's spike that's flooding through your bloodstream, and it's harming you.
Yeah.
Now, this is completely bollocks for a number of reasons. I'm sorry. Now I'm emotional.
No, I mean, you're welcome to say it, but weren't you at a stage behind the spike protein theory?
Yeah. At one point, when I wrote this article on BizNews, actually, I had positioned two possibilities, and I had stated, at the time, I said, well, indeed, if we're producing too much spike and it's overwhelming us, maybe that, when you do science, you don't, you put on all the hypotheses. Since then, I have backed off on that for a number of reasons. One reason is the number of antibodies. Okay? That's one reason. If you look at the number of antibodies, they're doing their work, and you would have to justify why, specifically for the spike, antibodies are not working. They are working. They're showing to work. That's one point. The second point is that there's several studies that show that logically, because T cells attack very quickly once your immune system is trained, they destroy the spike factory, very quickly. Okay. Therefore, there's no spike. And so, typically in science, or in toxicology, when you have less of something toxic, you should have less accidents. And the reality of it is you have more accidents after jab 2 and 3 when you have less spike protein. And the other element that's more important, also it's as important, is the fact that you would never have concentrated hits on the arterial system with protein circulating, because they would be disseminated, as I said. Okay. And the last point is the immune reaction is an immune reaction that is tied to the vaccine, and not to circulating spike protein. The other one is the lot theory. Yeah. Supposedly you have some lots that are contaminated with poison. Yes. Now, what people don't understand is this is poison. Okay,
or like chemotherapy, it's poison no matter what.
Yeah, vaccines are poison. Okay, they're toxic. They're cytotoxic. Okay, it's a question of dose. So adding poison to poison is not the problem. And by the way, if it were really poison, if it's inside the cell, inside the nanoparticles, it's not going to change anything. If it's outside the nanoparticles, you would see it in the arm, and you're not seeing it in the arm. There's no necrosis at the injection point, or hardly any. Mostly are accidents in the fat, and they're not. So the lot theory doesn't hold ground a minute for me. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people are not as rigorous as I am on this. I tested it. I why not? But you would have to explain why some people on the same vial, why some people died, some people don't. It doesn't make sense. You shake it, you would have the same poison to everybody.
How do we know those are the same vials?
Well, I mean, for example, I've never seen but just the same vial. Okay, the batch you can have. You can admit that there's some kind of variability, but in the same vial, if you get a shot of the same vial, and you have a person that dies in 7 minutes there, and the 6 others or the 5 others that had the same shot are fine. Yeah. Okay, it can't be the product.
So these vials would have been tested beforehand independently.
the slot theory. I mean, everybody jumped on the bandwagon after a study in Denmark. But the study in Denmark is a statistical study first, and they had huge good confounders. From a statistical standpoint, it doesn't stand. You don't do that. They have the first confounder is, of course, if you inject elderly versus young, you're gonna have more death in the elderly, right? So if you prioritize the lots on the elderly, that lot is toxic. Well, it's not toxic. It's just they're more sensitive.
Is Bolus theory is it just inconsistent with these theories, or does it disprove them? Is it yet to disprove them?
I've disproved those theories multiple times. I mean, I found I think 14 or 15 different ways to disprove the circulating spikes theory. Yeah. Normally in science you have one. Okay, you just need one. You need to show. Yeah, I think the lot theory is not serious because it doesn't work. It's if it's poison that they've put in there, it doesn't change anything because the doses are so small, and it's not showing it. The circulating spike theory is fundamentally not reproducible. I mean, you've had 5.6 billion people who've been injected with that and have had circulating spike. Okay, everybody had circulating spike. Yeah. If circulating spike was the problem, it's not just the people we've been seeing. Everybody would have problems because that would be reproducible. It's not. The Bolus theory is reproducible when every instance where, for example, there was a child who was injected directly into his blood port. His name is Milo Edberg, and he had myocarditis. He had lung problems. What else did he have? He was in a coma for a month and a half, etc. So I'm sure the doctor did a slow injection, but not slow enough. But he did inject the entire dose intravenously, and that created all that chaos. So, and when they did the test on animals doing intravenous and intramuscular, the intravenous had exactly the same reactions that we're seeing. So, mine is reproducible. And not only is it reproducible for the COVID vaccine, but it's reproducible other vaccines. So it's not a new story. There's been people testing other vaccines intravenously on animals, on mice and rabbits, and they've been finding exactly the same thing: thrombosis, myocarditis, or necrosis, heart necrosis, liver necrosis, and stuff like that. My theory is the only theory that does right now.
Does it also explain the amounts of instant death cases?
Instant death without any science. Okay, if you have science, if you have like a thrombosis, you can have science because you're starting to get a gangrene or something like that, or there's a number of different things. But instant death is mostly something. There's different cases. I mean, there's this. Most of the time, it's the heart that's hit slightly, and at one point, the heart stimulated, and it just doesn't work. There's another possibility. There's a few possibilities because one possibility also is arrhythmia, because if the heart has been damaged too much, it's going to start repairing. If it's repairing too much at the same time, then you're going to have signaling of cells that are not synchronous with the rest, right?
So in other words, if you already have an arrhythmia or like tachycardia or something, then even a little bit of damage like that where it would...
Yes, of course. And even Nick Hudson the other day sent me a case report of two young teenage boys who had died 3 and 4 days after their shots, and it was an intriguing why, but I solved it in about 2 minutes. It was basically so contrary to most myocarditis or heart things where they would find actually immune attacks and holes and stuff like that and necrosis. here you didn't have that. What you had is you had contraction bands. So basically the heart had stopped because it was contracting too much. And the reason for that is that it got too much epinephrine, adrenaline, whatever you want to call it. And it got that because of microperforation of the adrenal gland. So if you, and obviously, dying 3 or 4 days after is exactly the time where the T cells are attacking and cleaning up the mess. So they're attacking it, freeing up the blood tissue barrier in the adrenal gland, and basically dumping adrenaline, a ton of adrenaline in the bloodstream, and those poor kids died because of that, just during the night. It's exactly the same. It was very interesting. I found a study where there was autopsies of people when you inject them epinephrine intravenously at a high dose, about 2 nanograms, I think, you get those problems. You get that problem. And that's exactly what happened. So it's all explainable very well by the Bolus.
Just on the cancer theory and what you've discovered in respect thereof, where does the metabolic theory of cancer stand with regards to the genetic one, which you've contradicted? But where does that sound with the Bolus theory?
I'm not so sure with the metabolic cancer theory. You mean inflammation?
Yes. Basically that it doesn't really have anything to do with genetics. So
no, I think like a lot of times in biology, things are inverted. So you might have cancer. If you have cancer and your immune system is attacking somewhere, your immune system is creating an inflammation. So it's reversed. I'm not so sure that that explains the. And maybe maybe there are different ways to get cancer. I'm not, on the. I'm sure there are, but what I mean is maybe there's different ways to trigger cancer, but I'm not. But for the first part of the theory, it's certainly not the case. I wanted to talk about the cure because it's very important. If you ask a doctor what caused our myocarditis, or what caused autism, or what caused arteriosclerosis, they will always tell you they don't know.
Yeah.
Or they'll say it's genetic or some stuff like that, which is basically we don't know. Yeah. If you don't know, you can't solve a problem. Okay, you can't solve a problem. And if you don't understand the dynamics of it, it's going to be very hard to cure. What's interesting with the Bolus theory is you understand quite clearly what's happening. Notably, the cardiovascular damage that's done. You know that you've ruined the blood, the linings of your arteries, and so you need to figure out ways to solve that. There are ways to solve that. For arteriosclerosis, for example, a lot of people have been doctors have been prescribing nattokinase, brominaide, which seem to be from the literature. Again, literature seems to be showing that they're actually very good at lowering the fibrin and getting away, getting that plaque away. So that's
what are these? Ninokinetic
nattokinase. They're fibrinolytic natural supplements. That will eat away, that will help your body get rid of that plaque. We're not supposed to. I mean, the whole issue of what's happened is a disbalance, and so we need to help out the body repair itself. But it's never been evolved to go that far. So you need to either support it or nudge it in such a way. So for arteriosclerosis, stuff like that's the way forward. Most likely, also with oxygen therapy. Now, I said I would talk about oxygen therapy because I think I didn't invent it. It's been ongoing for over 60 years, and what's really interesting is, first of all, it's FDA approved, so it's not something that's dangerous supposedly, and on the contrary, it's proven extremely effective in a number of diseases that are related to vaccine harm. So, for example, it's been proven to cure Parkinson's disease,
Sure.
and to help. Yes, to cure, literally entirely. I mean, it's not going to fix things that have been completely broken. So if you necrosed an organ, it's not going to rebuild it completely. It might rebuild it partially.
Yeah.
And it's not going to bring back your memories if you lost the memories of your parents or your children. But it can stop the process and of degeneration and improve it. In my book, in the Needle's Secret, the book I finished, I share quite a few of the research papers. They've been, the pharma has been trying to basically bury these guys for 30 years. Hopefully, some doctors in the U.S. are and across the world, in Israel and France and in a lot of countries, are seeing results that are quite miraculous. And let me explain why it's miraculous. It's not. Yeah. It's something that people will understand. Yeah. Stem cells are the backbone of your repair capacity. Okay, they do that every day. But as you age, they're not necessarily going to go and get the message, and then and they're not going to repair everything. But in an ideal world, they should be able to repair you, and since they're self-renewing, they would never age, and we would be eternal. But we age, we drink, we smoke, whatever, we get hard by all sorts of things, and that doesn't occur. But fundamentally, it's our repair mechanism. So if you could trigger it in such a way that you send circulating stem cells circulating into your body for them to find things to repair, holes in the endothelium, areas that need to be fixed, that need revascularization. That's what they'll do. So they'll in the FDA approved conditions. For example, there are people who become blind very quickly, most likely from vaccines. It's been known that you can actually go and try and get HPOT, and it works. Okay, it's authorized. It means it's effective. So it's going to revascularize, and it's going to fix the endothelium and all the blood tissue barriers that have been damaged. So it's going to rebuild them. So that means that it can fix all the neurodegenerative diseases, part of the endocrine disorder, all the endocrine disorders that are notably over-releasing an hormone can be fixed. To a certain extent, I don't know, maybe it can actually help out on those that are not producing enough. Maybe it'll rebuild some of the cells that are missing. That would need to be tested. It's shown to improve fertility, because of course if you have if the barrier that's protecting your ovocytes or the male's sperm is broken down, your sperm count is going to drop. And so it's been proven to help for female fertility and male fertility both. And it also helps out people with autism. There's a woman who gave it to her daughter who had Down syndrome, and she's saying that it's cured down her Down syndrome. What's interesting is first point that's important for your viewers is it takes a lot of time. Okay, you can't expect if the body wasn't able to repair it the first time with the influx of stem cells that most likely got prioritized or monopolized in one area, and it didn't fix the rest, it means that the damage was extremely big, and therefore our natural response wasn't big enough. For that to that means that it's not an hour or 2 or 3 that are going to be enough. You're going to need 40 hours of HBOT or 80 hours of normal baric. So it also works at, I believe, I don't see a reason why it would. Maybe something is escaping me, but I don't think so. You could also buy an oxygen concentrator at home and do it at home with your doctor's help. Yeah, of course. The deep science around oxygen on the stem cells reaction to oxygen is not with pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So what pressure does is it doubles the amount of oxygen that you're going to what's going to be diluted into your blood, and therefore it doubles the replication of stem cells. But what's very important is a lot of course the pharma have been trying to backstab this, and so they've been saying, "Oh, we tested it for 1 hour or 2, it didn't work. It wasn't significantly
1 hour or 2."
Yeah, of course, and it's quite clear that even I was reading a few months ago. I was reading something around the eye because my mentor is becoming blind, and I wanted to help him. And there were some tests that they were saying not significant, but they were seeing after 3 hours they were seeing better already. Okay, so what is very clear is the literature, and there's tons of them, is always positive when you have 40 hours. Always. You are seeing results at 20 in a lot of time, but most people who get cured of Alzheimer's or Parkinson, Alzheimer's, you have great reduction of the process. You have people who have ALS who have been cured also. So no, it's actually quite miraculous, and in a way it makes sense. It's a bit like if you were doing high intensive sports. When you do that, what you do is you hyperoxygen your blood. So you're throwing a ton of oxygen, probably 3 or 4 times what you're supposed to get in that minute. Okay, and so what this does is your stem cells are going to react, because that means that you're fighting you're running away from a tiger. And you're going to have to fix the blisters on your hands or whatever your damage you have. Now, if you don't have damage to your hands from playing tennis or running or whatever, then it's all going to go to fixing. Okay? So that's what HBOT or oxygen therapy is. It's just a natural nudging of your body to its the appropriate ways of doing it. I'm going to have the only caveat I would have is if people have had the brain hit or the heart hit somehow, if it's recent and the heart hasn't been able to repair, or the brain, those are 2 areas of the body that don't have many stem cells.
Okay.
And we should be watchful for that. Why is that? And the reason for it most likely is that if you have too fast repair, you could have arrhythmias or heart attacks, or you could have some kind of epilepsy or stuff like that. So if the damage is recent and there's very little repair that happened, maybe you start with a slow, not too aggressive protocol. But if it's old or it's fine. If it's mostly in the brain, or if there's nothing related to the brain or the heart, it should be fine. There's no. I mean, I haven't read. I've read of one case of epilepsy in all of those HBOT, and that's about it. There's nothing.
So there's no evidence that would suggest that it might be able to help with the harm done by psychiatric medication.
It depends what you're talking about. I mean, it's again, if the damage is is permanent or not, but it certainly can help. For anything that has damage different areas of the body, it's going to try its best to repair it.
And it cannot do any harm.
No, I mean it.
It's
not going to start cancer. It's not going to start cancer. Actually, against cancer, it's probably recommended. It's actually funny, Nadia. I had one of my best friend died of glioblastoma just before COVID, and I had spent and I wrote in one of my articles recently that I had stopped everything in my startup for 2 weeks to craft mind maps of what you're supposed to do with cancer. And that was 7 years ago. And I hadn't gone back to that work I had done for this friend time. And I went back, and in it was HBOT, actually. Very interestingly. I had completely forgotten about it, but it makes sense. Have cancer, HBOT is the right way to go, because what it's going to do, it's going to help your immune system create more white cells. And you're going to have more T cells, and you're going to have more T cells attacking your cancer. And in the fight against cancer, that's fundamental. If you it's a fight. It's a fight of two exponential dynamics. And if you can boost the part that's on your side, it's all benefits. So for cancer, oxygen therapy is and I think for cancer clearly also is very beneficial.
Marc, as always, my brain is like, thank you so much. And
you're welcome.
We'll chat soon.
It's always a pleasure.